students, welcome to the 14th lecture in module 3 in HSC practices. In this lecture we will talk about hazard identification practices which are commonly used in offshore industry. This is lecture in module 3 in HSC course online by NPTEL IIT Madras. When we talk about hazard assessment, which is the first step in any risk assessment and management, hazard assessment actually is carried out with an objective which we already know. Hazard assessment is actually carried out to prevent work related injury or illness. To the workers or to the public. Therefore, assessing the hazards is important step need to be done carefully so that in sight of situation what could go wrong should be assessed in the beginning. Of what should go wrong can be forecast effectively. Therefore, hazard assessment is done through series of questions. That is very important step. Let us see what are the questions and how, what do they mean. Let us say the first question asked could be when. Hazard assessment is done in the plant when a new work progress is introduced. You can do it when new work progress is introduced or any change in work process is planned. Or operation is planned. You can also do it before any addition or alteration of new critical equipments D. If any near miss event reported unhealthy condition of the segment of the plant, then also one could do hazard assessment. The next question comes, how do you do it? All types of work and their related activities need to be first identified. And listed. While hazard assessment starts from this step, identifying hazardous activities amongst the list of operations being carried out needs a sound backing of experience. So, to do this, one should need a good experience, because a successful hazard identification is the first step for efficient risk assessment and management. So, that is important. So, identification should be done in a proper manner. So, therefore, let us say, how do we identify hazards? Identifying hazards for each of the work related activity is carried by 4 methods. This is carried out by 4 methods. 1. Physical inspection. 2. Task or job hazard analysis. 3. Process analysis. 'And lastly, incident investigations. So, once you do this, then you need to arrange them in an order, because it is better that you also list them in a specific order. Then the next step followed after identification is prioritizing the hazards. Prioritizing the hazards. Hazards of higher order should be identified so that they can be prioritized. This includes actually preparation of incident reports. So, prepare incident reports. List the severity of the incidents. In terms of its consequences. Applicable to personnel safety, plant and equipment, environment, etc. So, try to collect the data based on this. Data collection based on discussion with the workers on board, details borrowed from material data sheet, or let us say sheets, also based on incident statistics, that is number of people exposed, weather conditions, etc. Then prepare a report and summarize this report in the form of safety audit. Now, the moment we say reports to be summarized, let us talk about how do we call certain definitions of certain events. Let us say, what do you mean by incident report? Incident report actually deals with the work activities, deals or reports work activities related to near miss events. So, you need to document the conditions that were responsible for near miss events and diagnose the control measures which are effectively in place to avoid the accident. So, all need to be reported, we call that as incident report. The second could be, I want to assess the severity of this accident. How do we do that? It is a report which talks about work activities related to summary of work activities that resulted in serious injury or fatality. This report should have information related to number of people injured, what is the training capacity of these people, training capacity of the injured people, what is the technical competence of these people, what is the work time, what is the exposure hour, what is the shift handovers details, etc. So, you need to look into all related information which are summarized in what we call severity of the incident. The next stage, which has got a very important application in hazard assessment, is talking to workers. This deals with informing workers who should be aware of the unreported near miss events. So, you should inform workers about the near miss events. You should train them to react to such situations in future. One should also invite suggestions and feedback from the workers to know about the conditions on the near miss event. The next could be an important idea of collecting material safety data sheet. This contains all information related to the hazard substances involved in the process plant. This should contain information about the state of presence of the substance, that is it solid, is it liquid, gas, etc. You should also information about the flammability characteristics of the material. Limiting oxygen concentration, upper flammability, lower flammability, etc. You should also know about the quantity of the material involved. You should also know the potential hazard in terms of fire and explosion characteristics of the material, etc. The next could be industry incident or accident reports. It is important that every industry should compile a statistics report and circulate it of, let us say, similar industries, not necessarily the same industry, circulate the report for a parallel capacity building. So that this gives a better idea of the hazardous scenario. To the workers on board. Next could be reports of safety audits. This should contain knowledge, this should contain report about the control mechanisms, the safety norms and practices followed by the company, You should also have records on fire drill, safety drill, etc. You should have record on emergency response planning. It should have education sessions on safe evacuation plans, etc. So, once we have this report in form of hazard assessment or identification, then using this data very strongly in interlinking knowledge between these reports, one can proceed with what we call risk assessment. So, with the interlinking knowledge of data available in these reports, one can proceed with risk assessment. Risk assessment actually gives a better picture of various scenarios in the plant. Because this not only talks about the causes, but also the consequences. So, the risk picture talk about both the consequences which you see from the accident studies, but also the probability of this, which can be seen as causes. Once you have the number of incidents including the near miss events reported in the audit, then the number of incidents can be divided per annum or over a period of 1 year to find probability of occurrence of the incident. If one has details about the losses on each incident, losses can be personal, property, environmental, public, etc. Then one can also find the consequences in economic perspective to find risk. If you know the consequences in scientific perspective, then one can find reliability, so based on the risk report now or the risk picture now, one can now prioritize the risk in the given plant. Then the risk which has the highest order can be focused to improve safety of the plant. Therefore, focus can be directed towards the events which are responsible for the highest risk present in the plant, and therefore, friends, risk assessment includes details about severity of the accident. So, risk assessment should include details of severity of the accident or incident, whatever may be the case, does not matter. Probability of occurrence, which we found out from here, and consequence, which we can found out either in this angle or in this angle. So, put together will give me the risk assessment of that particular incident or accident. Once I know this, I should take it forward for 2 dimensions. So, once risk assessment is made, let us say once it is made, then take it forward for 1 to check the risk acceptability criteria, or risk tolerance levels. 2 to check the controls available so as to manage risk. So, therefore, now comes implementation of hazard controls. So, risk acceptability is well defined by statutes. We have already seen in the previous lectures about the Allard triangle. So, the boundaries for the tolerable region of risk is defined by various international agencies. So, it is predefined, it is very important, it is well defined, it is predefined. So, based upon the assessed value what you got, you can compare that with this and say is it okay or not. So, that is a mathematical comparison. But the second problem of risk management is much more complicated. So, we need to also identify the hazard controls present in the system. So, one need to identify those already exist in the plant and propose new or alternative controls to the plant, so that in both cases risk can be modified and brought to the level of tolerable region, that is this region. Once you do the assessment and try to do the management, the most important step follows. You need to communicate this. Now, communicate to whom? You need to communicate the information about the risk and safety measures, communicate information about risk and safety measures to all the workers in the plant. You have to also legally document this. as a part of safety audit report. You need to also look into this in detail for annual budget provision. Towards safety implementation plan, because ignorance of this or omittance of this will have highest potential of risk in the future. So, if you try to lead with poor communication or poor dissemination of these details, then this will lead to higher risk further in the future. So, proper training to be planned, proper training should be planned and imparted to all personnel about nature of hazards, about emergency responses, about modified control systems, about method of handling equipments, etc. So, this will try to reduce the probability of occurrence of those hazards or risk present in the system. It will reduce the cost implications. It will also improve on effective working of the possible controls. I am not saying possible controls are not there, you do not have to operate them. Okay? Effective working of possible control mechanisms, which will all lead to reducing the consequences, even though the hazard may lead to an incident or accident. This is what we call as responsibilities of risk management. Okay. Interestingly, you have identified the hazards, you have prepared enough reports, you have assessed risk, you have compared with alarm for acceptability, you have revisited or replanned control measures, you have imparted training to personnel. Do you think all this will improve risk management? Will it improve? The answer is big no. The answer is big no. There is one more important step to ensure that the risk management is successful. What is that? So, the most important step or stage to see that the risk management is successful is to evaluate the effectiveness of the risk management program. We need to evaluate this. So, while doing that, one should also look at the effectiveness of the control mechanisms, How can you do that? You can conduct safety trials, you can conduct quasi shutdown operations, you can conduct mock drills, you can revisit the periodic maintenance schedule of the control equipments, etc. So, with all that, one can revisit and check the effectiveness of control mechanisms or machines and equipments. So, one can ask series of questions which can be answered in this particular context. Have the control measures solved the problem? Available in place, solve the problem. The second question could be, did the control measures created any new hazard? Because sometimes this may also happen. Third could be, are any new control measures required? Any new additional control measures required as recommended in safety audit report? One has got to check this. Lastly, very important, are the control measures updated? Any recent modification to be done? Are they updated? Are they reanalyzed based on the recent near miss events? So, all these questions become very interestingly answers for evaluating effectiveness of the control mechanism, which ultimately lead to how effective a risk management is actually functioning. Okay. Subsequently, the identified hazards will get prioritized according to the critical hazard points what are gained in the whole understanding. Hazard controls are then implemented to prevent major accidents. So, therefore, friends, effectiveness of these control measures need to be evaluated on periodic basis for better safe working environment, which is considered as an important step in safety practices in HSE in oil and gas industries. What we had reported in inspection and safety audit reports, which is conducted periodically, maybe once in 6 months, which contains all the plus and minus of the whole incidents happening and all answers to such questions, which deals with only on evaluating the effectiveness of the risk management program adopted by the industry or by the company. So, in this lecture we talked about some interesting HSE practices which deals with hazard and risk assessment and risk evaluation, and some important reports which gives interesting information to the hazard analysis and identification, which becomes a backbone information for conducting effective risk assessment and of course, leading towards risk management program. Ultimately, we know that a risk management program is considered to be successful only when the evaluation says that the effectiveness of the control mechanisms are implemented based upon and they are reassessed, reanalyzed based upon very recent near miss events. So, it is a constant and continuous iterative scheme of HSE practices in industry, which is to be done on a continuous basis, so that It is not an intermittent training program that safety program is given once in 6 months, no. Safety audit rather is a day to day routine business. You have got to inspect this on day to day basis, keep on documenting them. Of course, you can summarize them once in 6 months, once in 3 months and disseminate this knowledge to all the workers on board, so that all are equally and parallelly educated about the risk management program what the company follows. Thank you very much.